Are we starting? Hello, NEC.
Hello, Robbie.
Hi, and welcome to the 47th National Executive Meeting. Today I'll be chairing, and I'm asking people in the room and anyone, if you're watching at home, to tweet us in with fun facts about the Spice Girls or your festive songs that we can listen to. First one from me is that the Spice Girls didn't pick their own nicknames. Fun fact about the Spice Girls. So, what do we go to next? Here.
So you've got some new members.
Yeah, so we have some new members from Zones. If you want to put your hands up and wave. Welcome to NEC. So we are quorum. Quorum is 15, so we have met that. And we've had some apologies, do I need to read them out? From Piers, Hanzika, Ellen and Shakira. Do we know if anyone else won't be will be sending in their apologies? Okay, I'll put Luke down as well. Come on, thank you. Okay, so we will move to, as Shakira's not here because she's unwell, we will play her accountability video, but obviously she won't be answering her questions, but she has said that she will do them via email. Yes, please, Bab. Is that all right? Why is that on you?
Hello everyone, it's Shakira Martin here, your National President, live from the Flybe aircraft, 17,000 feet, travelling from Belfast to Scotland. I did say I'll be from nation to nation, but I wanted to give you a brief update about what I've been up to over the last few weeks. Black History Month was fantastic, with many events happening across the country, but I'm really proud to say that I attended and spoke at City University, SOAS and Sunderland and Angela Ruskin, talking about my journey and into the student movement as the first black president of NUS. I gave evidence to the House of Lords on the Economic Select Committee, talking about the importance of bringing back maintenance grants. Students need money to live. They can't study if they can't afford to live. And I was really happy to champion that. As part of our work and what we do with our sponsors, Ainsley, I attended the Ainsley board meeting. That was really good. But I also went and visited Gloucestershire University and College, and I'm really excited about their evidence that they're going to submit to the Select Committee. We had our zone conference in October, where I gave my keynote speech about the vision of NUS for the next year ahead and the plans for all the VP officers. But I was especially excited about doing a parents and carers session, where we had a packed full room, learning about the experiences of students in education, not in education, and the barriers that student parents face, as well as having the first Holocaust survivor speaking at an event, the first in NUS's history. I also had the privilege of visiting Hull, the student union that disaffiliated, and I'm really proud to say that they're still in communication with us, and I had the opportunity to show them what the Shakira is all about. I also attended our race equity training because, you know, leaders, we practice as leaders we want to go on, and it's really important that everybody across our organisations get this training to ensure that we eliminate any form of discrimination and unconscious bias that we have as leaders of the student movement. I'm really proud to say that I attended Liverpool Guild Leadership event by Janet Bear. She is actually the president of UUK and the Vice Chancellor for Liverpool Guild, where I gave my vision for the year ahead and spoke about the importance of tackling the black attainment gap. We also, myself and Amite, had a meeting with Nicola Dandridge and Michael Barber, ensuring that students are at the forefront of the Office of Students, and I'm really looking forward to getting to know whether I got on the board. Lastly, I attended Cardiff, the National Society weekend. That was great. We sent 150 letters to ministers and MPs across the country about transport. Apprentices need better transport and need better pay to be able to fund their transport for them to be able to travel. Money should not be a barrier to people, for people to be able to succeed. Yeah, so I've got so much more to say, but not enough time. So please feel free to ask me questions. I'm sure you will. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering your question. Property of no one.
Yeah, so Shakira won't be here to answer those questions, but as I say, she will do so online. So next up, we go to our VP Further Education. So Emily's accountability video, please. I also haven't had many Spice Girl facts. I've had one or two, a few more, and I could like try and style this out between the videos.
Hello, my name is Emily Chapman and I'm your NUS Vice President Further Education, and this is my NEC report. This NEC report doesn't really cover everything that's happened this month because it has been an incredibly busy month, but the highlights of it I will go through. So one of the big highlights was really completing one of my priorities for the year, which is the Learn a Voice framework launch, which we launched to the membership at festivals. In Walsall College, which was to over 80 FE student leaders. It was an amazing event around development, talking about the Poverty Commission, the Post-16 Skills Plan, Introduction to Liberation, and Introduction to Makaton, as well as many other things. Also launching the Learn a Voice framework. We got sign-ups whilst we were still doing the presentation of the framework, which was really exciting. We then took it to the AOC conference, where we launched it sector-wide to principals and governors and college staff members. That was an incredibly big success. The other thing that happened at AOC conference is we took part in a student panel that AOC has worked with us on this year, and Colette from NUS USI, Jess Foster from Canterbury and East Kent College, and Cameron from Newcastle College came down to take part with me, where we spoke about votes at 16, education in general in further education, and also about Learn a Voice and the Learn a Voice framework. And I would like to say a really big thank you to those officers for coming down. It was a very good day. That was some of the stuff. I've been on several visits. I've launched the My FE Journey campaign this month. I've been to NUS USI Festival. I've been to NUS Scotland Zones, done a couple of Scotland visits. I have been to Derwin. I have been to the NATSPEC Student Parliament, and loads of other things that I really don't have time for in this video. I will do a post on Facebook to go over exactly everything that I've done. If there is anybody who has any questions, please feel free to give me a shout. Thank you very much.
Emily, you'll have 2 minutes as well to give a quick verbal update, and then we'll go to the clerks for questions.
Okay, firstly, I'll apologise for incredibly how ill I was and how bad I looked on that video, but as I say, I had to do it, so that's why it was a bit stuffy. So I've got 2 minutes to update, so I'm going to do this very quickly. I mentioned at festivals, we spoke to the 80-plus student FE leaders that we had there, that myself and Shakira have put £5,000 together to do a travel fund for further education to get them up to national conference. That will be launched on Connect, I believe, next week, and it will be open until the deadline for conference closes. So that's going to be launched, as far as I was told yesterday, next week. So that's really good. So we'll hopefully get loads of FE up there. UCAS Council, I was at last week, we talked a lot about widening participation, FE applications, HE applications as well. As I said, went to NUS USI, NUS Scotland, and I learned an incredible amount while I was there, especially about differences in language between my campaigns and how, for example, NUS Scotland works, so trying to make sure my work links up with them. New Year, I've got several more SU visits booked in. I'm really looking forward to the new year. I am starting to slow down with the visits now because next week I'm in training. There's no Makaton training, unfortunately, next week now, but I'll be at the Racer Equity training next week, which I'm really looking forward to. Finally, 2 days ago, after 2 years of waiting, the career strategy has been launched. Broadly, having a brief look at it, FE Zone are happy with it, but as per usual, we have barely got any funding on the career strategy and in FE, so that's a very high concern. House of Lords have announced they are doing a review of FE funding, which we will submit to and hopefully be able to provide oral evidence on, because the one Shakira did evidence to last time was for HE, now they're looking at FE, so that's really great. Technical education, thank you. Technical education T-level consultation has been launched and we're doing stuff on that. I'm also on the advisory stakeholder group for technical education, which is great. We're making sure SU student voice is there. My FE journey has launched a couple of weeks ago. We've already got 1,000 responses to the survey. Please fill it in because it's still going really well. Thank you.
Sorry, Emily, that was loads. Well done. Am I allowed to say that? Okay, so we are going to move to the clerks. Clerks or clerks? Clerks, like the shoes, for questions.
Okay.
Yep, sure.
What have you done to work with the European Students' Union to support your Brexit lobbying work? And you mentioned on your Facebook, when elaborating on your accountability, that there were key areas of concern that you have seen. Could you expand and update us on progress?
Yeah, so the first question, I don't actually do any work with ECU. That is it's more towards HE, so I'm not sure if that was a question meant for Amate. But I can say the work that I have been doing around Brexit is around widening participation, the skills gap that is showing up in FE. So I would say whoever submitted that question, if you could speak to Amate or Carmen, who were at ECSU last week, that would be really great. The Facebook mention, my social media really needs to stop being about my work, to be honest with you. But anyway, since I became VPFE, we have confirmed that we've got 65% of the membership, affiliated membership, is further education. So what I'm trying to do is make sure that we look like that, because when I went to an event last month called Learning for Democracy and other events, and people say, oh, you do FE as well, it actually really hurts. So what I want to do is, I've met with Simon and Shakira, thank you very much for having a meeting with me. We're going to do an action plan with 2 or 3 things in each area that we will look to change internally, and hopefully we're on the right track. We're on the culture of change. This is just making sure it keeps going. So that's what I'm going to do over the next few weeks, well, after New Year, really.
At Lead and Change, you talked a lot about self-care. When will you be signing off for Christmas, and what are you doing to ensure you take time off?
Yep.
And second question, how has the first 6 months of your role been as VPFE?
20th of December to the 8th of January, I will be in No Comunicado. I literally, to the point that I'm going to my nan and granddad's and they don't have Wi-Fi. So you are really not going to be able to get in contact with me. Sorry, folks, but I need time off. But I will be back from probably the 3rd on social media and stuff. The first 6 months, challenging, especially being a home worker of the full-time officers. I don't see the FTOs that often, and sometimes that feels that I feel a bit out of the team, and I want to be part of the team and stuff like that. There's been steep learning curves and realizations around FE and inner workings, but I think it's looking up. Just you have to work together, and Nikki and a mantra here: listen, learn, and lead, and that's what I'm going to keep doing.
Great. You talked a lot in your reports about festival.
Yeah.
So what were the highlights?
Okay, is that the last one?
There's
Okay.
one more.
Okay.
Sorry. So after Zone's conference, you attended and visited both Derwent and NUS-NEC.
Yeah.
What actions have you taken away from these visits and after the issues that were highlighted around Zone conferences?
Okay, so I'll take the Derwent and NUS-NEC one first. Yeah, I did visit Derwent, and another thing that happened with some of the Derwent students is Derwent on tour actually attended AOC conference, and they did entertainment in the Makaton choir, and Thomas, who's part of my FE committee, was part of that, and I literally got emotional at AOC conference because they did so well. So I just wanted to give him a little bit of a shout out there. My visit was absolutely amazing. I went to Derwent with Izzy. We spent pretty much all day, and thank God I wore comfortable shoes because it was a lot bigger than I realised. But it's an amazing place, and I learned quite a lot. So to the point that we had a meeting with the events team about things that we can do around making sure they feel comfortable at our events. I know Rachel went the week after to Derwent's, also had that conversation, and I and Izzy have had conversations about what we can do. There's something about a video at conference where we're going to ask those students to tell us themselves what accessibility is and what they need us to do to actually make their conferences accessible. So that's what we're going to do for them. There's a lot more that's going to happen, so please keep asking me and I'll keep you posted. Festival was absolutely amazing. It's my favourite event of the year by far. We had 80 plus FE leaders at Walsall College. We learnt the Learner Voice framework, which is a developmental tool for Learner Voice, and I think that's a massive change. That is not only just available for FE, that is available for any educational institution, so that's HE, sixth form, apprentices, to help develop Learner Voice, which I think is a massive lead into developing social action and student unions. That's a very big plus. There was a load of networking. Thank you to the officers that came. The officers had time to go around each table and speak to them. The workshops we had were amazing. We had the Liberation one. We had stuff about post-16 skills plan. We had Macathon. We had loads. I was on a buzz for about a week and a half from that event. It was absolutely amazing. So, yeah. Is that it? Yay. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you, Emily. Just to let you know, there are some packs, some information guides from LSE, just to let you know where the prayer rooms are, the gender-neutral toilets, the accessible lift, quiet space, and safe space. So that's all in there with some other lovely tips. So thank you very much, LSE, for that guide. That will be useful. Next up, we have Ali.
Hi friends, so since the last NEC we have been incredibly busy working on a number of different projects. The first thing to say is the Activities Fund has launched and we've been able to offer, provide up to 12 students' unions the funding they need for their local projects and to really revitalise our connection to the grassroots. And so things like local colleges creating sustainability projects to student union media groups working on women in leadership conferences. So we've got a number of different activities that we're supporting. The sports paper has been written and it's now just in the process of being branded up so it can be released very, very soon. So that looks at the barriers of participation and it has some incredible arguments for students' unions to go away and use so that you can win on your campuses locally. It's obviously November has been Islamophobia Awareness Month, which means that we've been working with other student unions in the campaign, speaking at different events, supporting other events. At KCL, Islamic Society, the Activities Fund actually supported and made the Islamophobia Awareness Month happen, which is the first one to ever happen. We are also working very, very closely with YIMBO and the International Students Campaign for students' unions to have a self-assessment tool to see how accessible they are to international students. So I'm really excited for that to launch. We've been working with the Women's Campaign to prioritise sexual harassment campaigns, specifically in student opportunities. So in January, around that time, we're going to be doing some very, very specific campaigning work to raise awareness and actually give students' unions the tools to tackle sexual harassment within student opportunities. We went to a festival, which was a gathering of all our FE colleges, or a lot of the FE colleges, and out of that we are rewriting a brand new FE strategy that looks like how best we can engage with our members, our FE members. We also went to the and hosted the apprenticeship weekend where we brought along a lot of the leaders within apprenticeships to figure out, to train them, but also figure out what their priorities for the year are going to be. We're also tackling this issue of neutral chairs in different institutions where the institutions are imposing neutral chairs for certain society groups. And finally, we are listening on the issues that students' unions are facing around NUS Extra, and we are not only going to talk about it now, we are going to deliver the next generation of NUS Extra, which will hopefully we'll start beginning to consult with students' unions on at strategic conversation. Those are the very brief things that I could bring up in the video. I'm happy to answer any questions. Also, the Love Issues campaign is almost finished to launch. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, just before we move to Ali's 2-minute update, we've got some Spice Girl facts for you. The Spice Girls released their own Impulse range, so hashtag, as Jess says, spice up your pits. We then had Simon Cowell decided not to manage the Spice Girls because he didn't think they'd be successful. Silly Simon. And Jerry Halliwell appeared in the 2001 general election video for the Labour Party. How fun. Well done, Jerry. OK, Ali, you will have 2 minutes to give us a quick verbal update. Keep sending in your
I like
facts.
that it was just Joe Cox at the back that was clever.
Says a lot about Noel.
Labour students are strong. Anyway, so a couple of things to update on. NUS Extra, so I mentioned it in the video, but we're really now getting rolling on essentially bringing NUS Extra into the next generation. This has kind of been spoken about for years and years and years, and I'm really committed to consult and listen, but actually deliver on this. It's difficult to kind of disclose what's going on because there's some commercial sensitivities around the future of NUS Extra, but you will hear about this very soon. We're doing some specific work within trading. A lot of students' unions will have heard about the situation surrounding Palmer and Harvey, and we're looking at existing sort of trading partners that we have to look at supporting students' unions in their retail trading. The work around quality students' unions, so one of the things I'm keen on is when it comes to the quality mark and development tools for students' unions, that we don't just look at the standard stuff, but we look at things like internationalization, which is things that I'm working on with Yimbo, mental health, which I know Izzy's working on, things around black attainment that Ilyas is working on. So I'm really keen on making sure that quality students' unions reflects the diversity of our membership. So that's other pieces of work that wasn't in the video. We've launched the Learning Academy, which is the one-stop shop for learning and development. So you will have seen that we have everything from face-to-face training. So we've provided free race equity training for all CEOs and students' unions. There's mental health first aid training in there. So it's just really exciting to see a space in which students' unions can go for learning and development. And actually one of the key things is this can be an online space for FE and small and specialist unions that can't necessarily go to things like Lead and Change. Last thing is the ethics board met for the first time a couple of weeks, maybe last week, I think, and kind of looked at the future of how we use our commercial arm to make the world a better place, but also ensure that all of our activity is fitting with our values.
Perfectly on time, Ali.
Thank you.
We'll go to the clerks for your questions.
Okay, 2 quite long questions. 1, please can you explain what you have done since you've been elected to increase NUS's understanding of small and specialist unions? It is recognised that SSUs struggle to engage with NUS. However, nothing other than a few small bursaries are given to aid SSU's engagement with NUS democracy. There is also little to no support given to SSUs locally to support them in the day-to-day running of their unions. Typically, one officer works alone to hold an entire university to account, often fighting to protect the union's independence and autonomy. If you have been unable to progress this work, please can you indicate a timescale and action plan for progression and let us know how SSUs can engage with the process to ensure this work is informed and representative. And the second one, the VPUD has sent an email out to unions on the 20th of November regarding #LoveSUs. #LoveSUs was originally set up to help unions through the November blues period across the movement. Now with it being December, a national conference voting LoveSUs to be a week-long campaign, can the VPUD update on progress and why we still have not received any clear dates for the campaign, and what resources unions will receive to run their LoveSUs campaign locally, as stated in the resolves of Motion 302 that passed at a national conference this year?
Yeah, I'm going to work on the way backwards. So I'll start with LoveSUs and do small and specialist first. So in the email referenced in the question, the dates actually for LoveSUs were in the email. So it's on the week commencing the 22nd of January. And part of the reason why we set it in January was because we've done a sort of thorough look at LoveSUs and how we can grow the campaign. And one of the things I'm keen on is, so the November Blues situation basically references issues that students' unions have in November, and officers specifically, because you're kind of halfway through the year and the clock is counting down to either re-election or your end of your term. But I really don't want LoveSUs to be about us talking to ourselves. I want us to talk to the sector and to the world around us, and to make sure that we can really get out the impact of our movement. So one thing that we're looking at doing with Love SUs, and something that I and students' unions seem to be really, really excited about, is to make sure that Love SUs is centered around showing the sector and the world around us that if it wasn't for students' unions, there would be so many students that would have dropped out of university, that would have had a far worse experience in education, and that it's actually students' unions that provide things like independent advice, liberation campaigns, mental health support, all of these amazing things that are pivotal to keeping people in education. And then to pivot that to say, okay, what are the tangible results that we can get as a result of Love SUs that can make students' unions more independent, more independently funded, and better resourced, and in a stronger place to make education for their local members a better experience, and targeting that towards the Charity Commission, towards government regulation, and perhaps looking at pivoting towards minimum funding requirements. So one thing I'm keen about Love SUs is I want to celebrate the work that we do, but also ensure that this campaign can go a long way in actually making a difference to the impact of students' unions locally. The resources are coming out, so we're doing videos around the stories of people. Like most of the people in this room, students' unions will have changed your lives, right? Engagement in your students' union and the student movement actually changed our lives, which is why we're all here at the lovely LSCSU. So we're focusing on the stories of individuals to kind of highlight the work that students' unions do. Around small and specialists, so one of the things that we're doing specifically is looking around actually shoring up the definitions of what a small and specialist SU is, because it's actually quite difficult. Where the buck stops with what a small and specialist union is. But nonetheless, there is some important work that needs to be done in this area, and the membership team is looking at what further support that we can provide small and specialist unions. And some of that goes back towards the Love SUs thing of, okay, we've got to look at the funding requirements and whether we can lobby, whether it's pivoting out of Love SUs or elsewhere, for sort of specified funding for students' unions. Other things that we're doing, so we're doing specific closed consultations on the democratic engagement of small and specialist SUs. So this is the first sort of time that we're doing specific closed door or closed consultation sessions. That will happen in January. And also the activities fund that we set up prioritized FE and small and specialist unions in the activity applications that we got, partly because we were really, really keen to engage with students at a local level and specifically within small and specialists to make sure that they have their campaigns are representative. Yes, so that's up.
Two more, Ali. Well, three more, but I'll give you two now. Can you tell us how you supported FE unions in taking part in strategic conversation at Liverpool Guild and how many FE unions attended? Mm-hmm. And then what is the VPUD doing to support FE unions attending national conference in Glasgow next year?
Cool. So I don't actually, I tried to get my hands on the data of how many FE unions attended StratCon. I don't know, but what we always do is, it was mentioned earlier, we always provide specific bursaries and funding support for students' unions, FE unions, to come to things like strategic conversation. I don't know how many took that up. But what this does say, and it's something I said at the last NEC, and it's something I keep saying, is this is symptomatic of a wider problem that we need to address, and we have the data to prove it. We've consulted with FE unions in the democracy review, so we've got, you know, the numbers to show it. The FE unions struggle to come to big events that are far away. And it goes back to the small and specialist thing, it goes back to funding, priorities, number of officers. It's really difficult for FE unions to come to these big events that they can't, you know, they can't afford to run campaigns on their own campuses. They're going to spend thousands of pounds to come to Liverpool. So one thing that this is symptomatic of is we need democratic reform in the way that we deal with engaging with our FE members. And the great irony on this issue is that a lot of hands that went up last year at National Conference that were, you know, supporting this idea suddenly aren't going up anymore. And that's really frustrating for me because we have to address the issues of the democracy review and, you know, the democracy issues that we have within NUS. Our members expect us to do this. And I can't help but to see that when NEC suddenly had an influx of more representative students, black students, Muslim students, Jewish students within NEC, suddenly we became unrepresentatives. When we had a Muslim president and we had Muslim FTOs, suddenly we had a democracy problem. Now, that seems not to be a problem anymore. These, you know, these critical issues that existed last year have magically, you know, gone away. So I think a lot of people need to reflect on the things they say and the context in which they say them, and that if we're actually going to support FE unions, you need to be consistent and not just push political agendas. The issue around how many FE unions attending national conference, one of the things I'm keen on, I mean, Emily spoke to the travel support and the bursary support that her and Shakira are doing, which is fantastic. So the one thing we have to do is, and I said this during the elections, we have to get them affiliated first. If we're going to call ourselves a 7 million strong membership, if half of the colleges and sixth forms aren't even affiliated, what are we talking about? What's fantastic is we've had 6 colleges affiliate in as many months. So we've got 6 new members of the NUS family, which is fantastic. We need to give them a reason to come. So the things around democracy review that I spoke about, there needs to be something substantive away from lip service around FE representation, which is really, really important. And so there needs to be a fundamental change in the way that we engage. We can't just expect FE unions to show up at the end of the process at national conference. There's a whole journey that leads into national conference, and things like local conversations around developing policy and going to the FE unions rather than expecting them to show up at Glasgow and vote our way. That's not a helpful way to engage our membership, right? So maybe we need to burst this little bubble that we exist in.
Final question. On top of the budgeted £5,000 pot for the Activities Fund, can you inform the NEC of the costs of running this campaign, including the creation and delivery of resources for the Activities Fund?
Yeah, barely anything beyond the £5,000. I think it was a couple of £100 about getting the message out there that included a big cheque, which is the bane of my life, that thing. You want to hold me to account? Hold me to account on that dumb big cheque. But anyway. Look, we've beyond the £5,000, we've barely spent a couple of £100 around getting the word out there, and we actually received so many applications, and I'm so excited. Here are a few highlights that I wanted to raise at NEC, and I think it's important because it goes back to the thing of actually supporting our members on the ground. At Royal Veterinary College, they've now run exercise workshops in support of mental health on their campuses, and this is with direct support from NUS. KCLSU's ISOC ran their first ever Islamophobia Awareness Month, again, direct support from NUS. Activists at Vision West Nottinghamshire College Students' Union are running their environmental campaigns and sustainability campaigns, again, direct support from NUS. All of these fantastic campaigns are happening locally, and this sort of vitalized grassroots elements of campaigns on our campuses are happening because of direct support from NUS. This is the first time that we've kind of gone local onto the grassroots elements of campaigning, making sure that we're touching the lives of every single student individually, so that when they go through their education and you stop someone on campus and you ask them about NUS, it's the NUS Extra card most of the time, which is a good thing, great card, great prices, but also... Thanks very much, I'm very good at that. But also, through their societies, through their activist spaces, they know that NUS is connecting with them at a local level. So that's that. Is that the last question? Okay, fantastic. Have a great time.
Thank you, Ellie. Okay, so, bear with me 1 second, NEC. Okay, so we're moving the agenda slightly because one of the members of staff, to check I was allowed to say that, has to leave earlier. So we're going to go to strategy and policy development for half an hour in terms of the Poverty Commission. So this is the part of the NEC, I'm going on script now. So this is the part of the NEC meeting where we may have discussions or longer debate over policy or strategic issues. And this may be in the form of debate, informal discussion, presentations, and a proposal in the form of reports or briefings. This is a presentation. So we're still going to live stream? Oh, we're still going to live stream. And can I ask Katie Shaw to deliver the session on the Poverty Commission? Thanks, Bab.
Hello. I've got some slides, possibly. Oh, that's nice. Robbie, the Spice Girls were awful. because I remember them first time round and they were terrible. Cool. I've also always wanted to do a talk on drug litter balls, so this is wonderful. Hi everyone, I'm Katie Shaw. I'm the Policy and Campaigns Manager at NUS, and I'm going to talk to you about the Poverty Commission. There'll be some slides and then there'll be some discussion, but it will take no more than half an hour. So, slide please, Gary. Thanks. So, what is the Commission? Shout at me because I've touched things. Basically, the Poverty Commission is a report that is there to address sort of deprivation and the impact that poverty has on working class people in post-16 education. So that is colleges, that is universities, that is adult education, that's doing ESOL courses, doing stuff, learning and work in the workplace, so everything that is kind of like is post-compulsory. And we're looking particularly at how people access and succeed through post-16 education. And this piece of work sits in like a broader landscape at the minute around people talking about kind of class and poverty, particularly as we're kind of like sort of a decade on really now from kind of the government's austerity agenda. There's like big enough data sets there to be able to start talking about the impact that austerity has had on communities, but also kind of like some more sort of systemic stuff that's happened over long periods of time that impact on people's ability to access education, and particularly because we have an education system that isn't set up for now. We have an education system that is based on kind of the Industrial Revolution and colonialism, and that's what basically our post sort of 16 education system is there to kind of do. So we need to think about kind of how education is more accessible for sort of the diverse groups of people that come through it now, and not just for elites. So we've been in a position to bring together a range of stakeholders to effectively and kind of engagingly deliver a series of recommendations for this work, which we're quite excited about, and I will talk to you about who the commissioners are and how the process kind of works. So slide, please. Ooh. So this is our commissioning board. So what's happening now is basically we're in the research phase, and there's different ways that we're going about getting research. So one of them is by we've got this glorious board of commissioners here, and I'll talk through them in a minute. But their role is we bring speakers to them that have a range of expertise, and I'll talk a little bit more about kind of what that looks like. But their role is to kind of quiz speakers on key themes related to poverty and kind of shape those discussions. And the people we've got on this commission have really strong backgrounds in kind of poverty and social justice. We've got representatives from class who kind of think tank. We've got a barrister and a social justice commentator. We've got a representative from the TUC. We've got representatives from inside the student movement. We've got one of the directors from the Equality Trust, which is the organisation that was set up off the back of The Spirit Level, which is a book about inequality. We've got some campaigners on there. We've got, yeah, it's a really nice kind of broad group, and they're amazing, and we're kind of like 2 sessions in working with them at the minute. So next slide, please. Thanks. So the way that we're cutting up the evidence sessions, so we're doing these three kind of day-long evidence sessions. And the first one we looked at kind of money broadly. The second one we looked at structural barriers, and the third one, which is on the 19th, so next week, end of next week, or the week after, it's soon, before Christmas. We're looking at kind of educational institutions themselves and what they do to support access and education. So the way that I guess the sessions are run, we bring people together and they present for 15 minutes, and then our commissioners quiz them and kind of ask for more information. So we've had some really, really interesting sessions so far. The one on money was great. So we had a speaker from the National Association of Student Money Advisors, and she told us that basically if students need to take a break from their studies for whatever reason, they need to take a break for a year because they've maybe got caring responsibilities, they're not entitled to any benefits. So the best thing for them to do is to quit their course so they can sign on and get benefits, which then obviously has a massive impact on them being able to continue into their third year, into their second year, wherever kind of they are in their studies, which is really problematic. We had evidence from an organisation called Step Change, and they're a national debt charity, and they told us that the biggest increase in their client base are people under 40 now coming for debt advice, are in quite sort of serious serious trouble. And we had a speaker from the GMB that told us that you're 3 times more likely to be in secure gig work if you're 18 to 24 and twice as likely if you're black. So sort of looking at kind of what the working environment is, particularly for young people, particularly people studying, coming out of education. The second session, we had speakers from the Behavioural Insights team. So I talked about how when you're living in sort of poverty, how that impacts on you being able to make really like good choices, and how your brain works, and how you're kind of doing that fight and flight stuff, and how kind of like when you're dealing with lots of like financial issues, trying to support a family, trying to get through education, you're like, it's having an impact on you being able to make sort of choices that a lot of people take for granted. And we had speakers from Sutton Trust that talked about when you break kind of the population in the UK up into kind of 5 quintiles in terms of how people are, people kind of are kind of financially sound. At the age of 5, people aren't at the same starting point in their education. So the more deprived you are, there is a lag in your learning, and that lag gets worse as you hit 18 and go on to university for those that go to university. So there's actually loads and loads of stuff we should be doing around early years policy to kind of close that gap of deprivation. We are also taking written evidence. So you should have all had emails, lots of emails and lots of tweets that say, please send us 4 answers to 4 questions. It's a really simple consultation. So as part of my role at NUS, I spend a lot of time filling in government consultations, and they're really boring. They're like 25 questions, and they're on technical things, and they're awful. And this is 4 questions, so it's really easy. And I'm going to put it to you now, like the first 2 submissions we've had in are from Newcastle College and for the Royal Scottish Conservatoire. I've probably got the name wrong, but basically small and specialist in Scotland with no staff members. So for all of you in big unions, you've got to put something in, like it's important. But also all the VPs and Liberation officers are going to be working with committees to submit evidence as well. So the way that I'll go through the questions in a moment, because that's going to form part of the discussion. But what will happen with all that evidence gathering is that it's all kind of collated. So lots of different organisations. We've reached out to about 100, 120 organisations across the UK. And they're all they're kind of submitting evidence from Universities UK and the Russell Group, to Relate, who are an organisation that do things on debt and relationships, to kind of really broad different organisations, to make sure that we've got quite a broad picture, so that when we write the report, there's really strong stuff there. And what we're doing as well is asking for recommendations in that, so other organisations can do the thinking, and we just collate it all. And we're running a bunch of listen and learn visits, which is where we go out to different organisations in some cities and go and talk to people that use different education services. So whether that's a group of people that go and learn ESOL, or kind of you are in different organisations that do kind of informal learning because they they can't access mainstream schooling and stuff, and kind of going to go and find out about their experiences of education. Slide. Sweet. So now we're going to have a little discussion. So these are the 4 questions in the consultation that has gone out to students' unions and to organisations. And you can see it's a very simple consultation, but we're getting really interesting data back. So what we're asking is, the first question is talking about kind of like, to explain the sort of lay of the land, like for the constituents that you represent. So if you are an officer in a students' union, what are the anecdotal things? What is the context? Like, what does it mean to be at Derby College and have really terrible transport links? And what does poverty and accessing education look like for your students? So this is a bit of kind of like a oh, what was that? It's a bit of like blurb and all right, cheers, Gary. A bit of like blurb and context about that. And then the next question is obviously about evidence. So what, do you have any data on this? A lot of you in HE institutions will your institutions will collect that data. Who do you go and talk to find out what that data is? Do you have like a WP WP staff? Do they have kind of retention data that you can take, those kind of things? We also want to know about like the good news, the stuff that works, because that's really important. So like, what are the projects that are run in your institution that really support working class people to access and kind of go through education? Are there peer mentoring schemes? Are there really good outreach programs in local schools? You know, what is the stuff that's really good? Because there's no point in us having like a report that's just full of doom. We need to be talking about like what we should be doing and what works. And the final question is about like what recommendations do you want to see? Like, what would your top 3 recommendations be? And we're getting lots of interesting ones and lots of stuff coming back around like funding and finance. So as you can see, it's a really simple and straightforward consultation. The reason it's that simple is we want as many organisations to participate as possible. So it's fine sending out a really lengthy consultation to lots of big organisations where we only get like UUK, AOC, Russell Group, and a load of kind of red brick universities responding, but we don't just want to hear their answers. We want to hear from like small and specialists. We want to hear from a students' union that's run entirely by 17-year-old volunteers. We want to hear from a community project that is run entirely by volunteers, because that's where we're going to get really interesting data from. Not to say that other data is not interesting, it definitely is. But, you know, we want to see a really broad picture of what education looks like. So what I want you to do for 7.5 minutes is just turn to kind of make a little group around you and kind of have a bit of a discussion on those 4 questions. So you could have a think about where you might go to get evidence for your submission, have a think maybe about what are the types of things that you would want to see in the recommendations, or talk more just broadly about kind of like the lay of the land of that first question. Is that cool? And then we'll do some feedback, because everyone likes feeding back. Sweet. Cool. 7.5 minutes. people's discussions, because that's always fun. Is there a group that would like just to kind of give us 30 seconds to a minute on what you discussed? Maybe 2 minutes, because actually you're having some pretty cool discussions. Ali.
Oh, do I not get a microphone?
I have no idea. It's not a big room.
Yeah, but it's for the live stream.
Oh,
Is it time? So we spoke about like how often when it comes to post-16 education, we intervene when it's too late. And the journey of access into education and succeeding in education doesn't start at college or at university. It often ends there. So that there needs to be a much more targeted intervention by government into the early years of education for young people. And to make sure that sort of we could talk about, I said we could talk about things like EMA and WP programs and the elitist way in which some of the top institutions stop working class BAME students from coming into education, but often they've already been set on that journey years before. So some policy ideas were ban grammar and public schools and make everything into a state school, because sectioned off education doesn't make any sense. So, create, I'm trying to be not, it's very, very early in the morning, but yeah, just ban private schools. It's pretty easy.
I have no opinion on that wonderful policy suggestion. Just right there, that was very good.
There you
go. And the stuff we had with the Sutton Trust really kind of highlighted how educational inequality really, really is prevalent in early years, and like we don't start on the same footing at post-16. So yeah, that early intervention stuff's really important. But yeah, ban public schools, maybe. That would help. Cool. Yes, sorry, I don't know your name, but thanks, Emily.
Yeah, leading on from that about it being important to address issues of access and education from an early years point of view, the government currently has things like area opportunity funds, which are very often time limited, so it's usually quite a large amount of money that's given to areas like I work in Stoke and we have a huge amount of money put into the schools there, but it's time limited, so it basically runs through political manifesto cycles, which means they can only work with kids that are in year 9 and up, and obviously that's still too late. So the policy ideas we were talking about is that being stretched further and taking it out of the party politics, because it just makes it so short term, and as we said already, it's important to get people so much earlier on than we are with these short term projects.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like things like Sure Start and stuff, you see lots of like schemes kind of start and then they're quickly kind of unfunded. So you then don't have, you have kind of generations of young people going through education with very different experiences, even in the same school. So that's really interesting. Thank you. Have another comment? Amelia, do you want to? Just behind you, Emily.
Sorry, just kind of going on from the early years and educational inequality stuff. We talked a bit about academies as well and the role that they play, haven't they? Sort of the role they play in all of this. And also kind of thinking about, well, educational institutions aren't just sort of passive in this, right? They actually often make things worse. They often exploit working class students too in many ways. It's important to see that and not just go, okay, students get they're either helped or not helped. Actually, there are some ways in which universities actively exploit students, whether that's students who teach or just from things like rent, really. And I think seeing the situation not as just like a deficiency that working class students have, but seeing these institutions as things with agency which have historically and continue to exclude working class and other marginalised students.
Yeah, thank you. And I think what I hope by getting more students' unions and institutions involved in feeding into the report is that it's not just a set of policy recommendations for government, it's a set of recommendations for institutions as well, to have kind of a serious think about how they engage and support people. We have, comment right at the front. Let me pass the microphone. Going to do a spy skills routine for us when he gets to the front then.
Okay, I have to test this first. So we also talked about cuts to EMA, So before people get to university, a lot of working class students have to, while they're in like college and FE, have to work at the same time as well, which obviously has an impact on their education. And they often don't get paid very much either. So that's another stress that can impact on their education. We talked as well about the fact that university isn't for everyone. So a lot of people go into apprenticeships where they're paid an absolute pittance and it's not minimum wage. So one policy recommendation we would have would be to pay everyone who's in work, whether it's an apprenticeship or not, a minimum wage, living wage. We also talked about barriers to working class people succeeding in post-16 education is obviously the attainment gap. So BME students are more likely to be working class. And they face, I mean, we call it an attainment gap, but it's actually just racism, and black and minority ethnic students being marked much lower just because of racism. What evidence do we have of all these? That was kind of hard to answer, but it's just people's like lived experiences, and you know, it's factual. And yeah, 3 policy recommendations. So we said reinstate EMA, living wage for everybody, an actual living wage as well, not what the certain people regard as living wage, and free education, not just university being free, but freedom of speech for groups who are having neutral chairs imposed on them and things like that. But yeah, so we talked about a lot.
Cool, excellent. Thank you very much, everyone. So just to go through the final slide. Excellent. So Bono's going to come and help us. No, he's not. He's not been in contact, which is a good thing. So what's... but this is the best poverty picture I can find. So what's going to happen when the report comes out is, so the report's being written in January and February, and it'll be launched at the end of February. But what happens with lots of reports when they're written by organisations and policy organisations, that everyone reads it, they go, this is nice, and it goes on a shelf somewhere and gathers dust, so it's a little bit pointless. So what we're going to do with that is actually build a campaigning and influencing strategy around the key recommendations from the report, and make sure that the stuff that we can be doing nationally and that unions can be doing locally to make sure that we're actually lobbying on the stuff that we're saying and the stuff that we found out in this report. Otherwise, just doing a report for the sake of doing a report is pointless. A lot of the stuff we're doing now on social media, on the sort of class dismissed hashtag, and we're working with students and student officers to find ambassadors that want to kind of talk about their experiences. We're in the process at the minute of commissioning an organisation to go and do some really good case study videos, and kind of really encourage you, if you want to tell your own story or you've got students that have got really interesting stories around how they've accessed education, do get in contact, because we want to make sure that actually what we need to be doing as well as the report is being generated is preparing kind of the student movement to be able to talk about poverty and its impact and class and its impact on education, so that when the report is launched, like, students are kind of there and ready for it and ready to kind of be angry about it and ready to kind of like see what's in there and kind of want to fight for those recommendations and kind of improve education. So if you do want to get in contact, next slide please. Thank you. These are the ways. So yeah, drop me an email, or you can kind of go to the Poverty Commission inbox, or just get in contact with me or tweet on the hashtag class dismissed. But please do take some time to submit some evidence from your union. There is a hard deadline of the 12th of December, but I have been telling organisations I'll take things until about the 15th, 16th if you need a little bit more time. So it's not quite an NUS deadline. Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
Is it only unions that can submit evidence through this?
No.
Can like student organisations and individuals submit
Absolutely,
evidence too?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so we've had submissions coming in already. So we've had things from academics. We've had a submission from a music teacher who does like cello lessons in the evening and is talking about how that's only like the privilege of kind of like middle class kids. So like, yeah, a range of academics, different organisations. So yeah, it's broad and open to everyone. So please do submit stuff. But yeah, you should have all had emails, but also like it's on NUS.org and NUS Connect. It's a very simple process. Please fill it in. I would look forward to reading your submissions. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. NEC, we're now going to move to Izzy Lenger's accountability. I haven't got any more Spice Girl quotes or facts if you want to send them in. Oh no, Aaliyah did send me some actually, sorry.
Hi everyone, I hope you're well. I'm Izzy, or VP Welfare, and I'm just going to give you a quick rundown of what I've been up to since my last video diary. So at Zones, we launched our Holocaust Memorial Day campaign, Our Living Memory. We were really honoured to have Marla come to speak to us, a Holocaust survivor, the first time in over 30 years that this happened with NUS, and look out for the next stages of our campaign in Holocaust Memorial Day on the 27th of January. I've been doing lots around social media, so I've called for SUs to send us their online harassment and social media policies, to compile a best practice one and send that to students' unions. We've also made sure that social media guidance goes out with every joining instructions for our NUS events. We've secured mental health first aid training in the Learning Academy, so it's now available for all students' unions to access at a discounted rate, the cheapest that you'll find. And we've also got subsidised place for FE, and we're looking to make that free by looking for sponsorships to do that for FE and small and specialist unions. So we've just sent out our student support handbook, and so if you're an FE or HE union, you should have got it already in Wales, England or Northern Ireland. Apologies to Scotland, but your rules are really different, so you get your own one. We have recently completed a substantial piece of research looking at the levels of fuel poverty in student housing, and that's due to be launched in December. I'm going to present the findings to MPs at the APPG for students in December, and be sending out resource packs to students' unions to accompany it, including information on energy efficiency and switching energy supplies and stuff. Interfaith Week is actually this week that I'm filming this, and shout out to all the amazing work that's been happening at student unions across the country. We've teamed up with the Interfaith Network, the leading interfaith charity in the UK, to provide coffee conversations, another way to engage with the campaign, so look out for them. Great work to everyone who did stuff. So NUS oversees kind of standards and codes for halls. So they're being reviewed, and we've successfully lobbied for clearer guidance for accommodation providers on mental health. We've also started to lobby for trans-inclusive student accommodation, including priority accommodation for trans students in en-suite accommodation. Following my trip to Durham College, myself and Emily are looking into how we can make our events more accessible, including Makaton on a lot of our signs, so we're looking to do that, and we're working on that in advance of National Conference. Met with Unison, and we're planning our student hardship survey for students on NHS placements, so look out for that if you're one of those students. Release, so we met Release, the leading drug charity in the UK, about providing drug testing kits to students' unions, so that's an ongoing piece of work that we're continuing to work on. Working with Hareem on our Women of Faith conference, that's planning still going ahead. Feeding into the Poverty Commission, going to be working with the Welfare Zone Committee. Congrats on being elected to the Zone Committee. We're doing in the final stages of creating some new resources for the Ready to Rent website, so look out for them as well. And we're also going to be looking at doing guides for tenants on their rights, because that's really important, and that will be hopefully released soon. We're doing lots of SU visits, speaking at lots of things, so shout out to everyone who's invited me, and look forward to ones coming out in the future. We've just launched our 2017-18 alcohol impact survey, and we're running the first alcohol conference, which will take place, students' alcohol conference, will take place the 22nd of February. And been supporting other events like National Sikh Week, Islamophobia Awareness Month. If you're a Muslim student, do fill in the survey, and it's really important to have your views heard on your.
Okay. That must have been your time. Izzy, if you want to come and take your questions. We have some Spice Girl facts. That originally there was a different Spice Girl to Emma Bunton called Michelle Stevenson. I bet she's gutted she left the band. The Spice Girls used to be called Touch. Thank God they changed their name. And Stop Right Now was beaten to #1 by Run DMC's It's Like That. I'm a bit torn because I love Stop and this song, so I don't know which one I want to win. Maybe we could do a poll. Let's see. I'm going to show to your joy. And Izzy, over to the clerks.
Do I have 2 minutes to update?
Oh, you do? Shit, yeah. Okay. Sorry, 2 minutes, Izzy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Izzy, VP Welfare. I just want to apologise for the video. I didn't do the cutting and editing. So shout out to Jess, who I've been working on for 2 things, and her name got cut out twice, but I'll come on to them, and also don't do the subtitles, so apologies for some of the wrong spellings. I guess just some updates. I've been speaking at lots of different events. Thanks to everyone who's invited me. Shout out to a few highlights. Spoke at Guild HG conference, Brooks question time on Brexit, that was really fun, and lots of other things, so thank you. I've been really focusing on FE engagement, and I have been loving it. So I went to, I didn't mention it in my video, but festival, which was the largest festival ever, so shout out to Emily. Apprenticeship weekend, I've been doing lots of college visits to hearing about what they want from the welfare campaign and how they feel disillusioned from it, and how we can bring them back in and make our campaigns relevant to FE. So with Jess, I mentioned the work with Release, so that was with Jess, and we're doing a drug survey, so that should be being launched in late Jan, early Feb, so do look out for that. I just wanted to give it a cheeky plug about students' drug use. And in that there's going to be, so it's for all students, and in it's going to be a specific part for trans students, to answer specific questions as well. Been doing stuff on social media, so like I mentioned, but we've been planning a lot more kind of what we're going to be doing in advance of National Conference to make sure that our spaces are accessible and friendly and welcoming to everyone. And yeah, Our Living Memory, the Holocaust Memorial Day campaign. So a blog's just gone up on NUS Connect actually about kind of the next steps of the campaign and my views in it. And how it will go forward, and so there's a link, and I'll send it out. Like if your student union wants to get involved, we can send our resource pack that we're sending out, and lots of stuff. So let us know if you want to get involved. We can send that out to you straight away. The biggest interfaith week ever happened, and I'll mention that. We launched some mental health first aid stuff, and congrats to Jess and my amazing committee doing stuff on tenants' rights. Yeah, I'll just answer any questions.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Thank you. Izzy.
Okay, so you've got quite a few questions. At Leeds University, we had 14 successful Interfaith Week events engaging over 200 students. I was wondering what NUS was doing to best equip the unions to organise Interfaith Week, as my union didn't know until I told them that it was National Week. Thanks.
Okay, so...
Sorry, can I ask the second one?
Yeah.
Can you give us an update on the plans for Holocaust Memorial Day and how student unions can get best involved in the campaign?
Okay, so I'll just do the Holocaust Memorial Day one because I just mentioned it first. So like I said, the blog's gone out on NUS Connect. I'll be sharing that. What we're doing kind of moving forward is we're going to get videos from groups of students. So look out for them of specific groups that were targeted under Nazi persecution. And so they'll be being shared and being made in advance of the 27th of January. We're also making a pack for JSOCs and for students' unions on how to run events on campuses, who to contact and all of that type of stuff, and an information pack about it as well. So that will be sent out. So if you want one, let me know. There's a little link at the bottom of the article, and I'll be sending it around as well on Just Mail and whatnot. So let us know if you want to get involved with the campaign. And on that, I was really proud and honoured to be able to launch it at Zones and host Marla Tribich, a Holocaust survivor, who came to speak to us, and we were really humbled to hear her testimony of her experiences in the Holocaust. The second one was around Interfaith Week. So, like I said, this year was the biggest Interfaith Week ever, which is really exciting, and it was an honour to be part of it. So I teamed up with the Interfaith Network, like I said, which is the leading interfaith charity in the UK, to provide coffee conversations. We saw that SUs were doing loads of great work and it was happening very locally, and we didn't want to kind of tell SUs what they should be doing because they were amazing initiatives were happening. And when I met with Interfaith Network, they said that is the core of the campaign, what SUs do and the different ways that they approach it. And so we wanted to really kind of empower that autonomy onto them. But what we did, we ran coffee conversations, which was a kind of bit of a smaller campaign for students who might not want to get involved in their interfaith campaign on their campus, or might want to do more, or just there wasn't an event happening, and we kind of encourage students and student unions to do that, and that was really successful. So yeah, thanks. Oh, and I hope to be doing more, and we're launching our interfaith campaign next term with all the national representative faith organisations, student faith. Sorry.
It's all right. So I've got two more for you, and they're quite similar.
Okay.
What are social media guidelines that have been sent out in joining instructions, and should they be used by students' unions as guidelines for social media contact on a local level? And then you tweeted about the use of swastika by a student at UAL as part of a public art project. there have also been numerous instances of swastikas and other Nazi imagery on campus so far this year. What is the best way to tackle it, and how should students' unions combat this?
For sure. So I'll speak first about the social media one. So with social media, like I said, we put social media guidelines in every joining instructions that now goes out for every NUS event that we host. We want to ensure that our spaces, but also our online spaces, are as safe, accessible, and as welcoming as possible. And so it's a really important, something that's really important to me, and that's what we've done. We really encourage it to be local. So what we're doing is we've made a call out to students' unions to hear their policies that they have in students' unions, and then we're going to compile a best practice one that we're going to send out as a recommendation to students' unions. So that's kind of the more local level. And now we're working on developing that and how we create a whole kind of social media strategy in advance of national conference, and then how we do it kind of further down the line with working with MPs and kind of groups like that, and of course social media companies. Basically, the UAL one, it's a really hard thing for me to talk about. I was devastated to see that a student thought that that was an acceptable art project, or a project that could be displayed at a university, if not anywhere. In my opinion, what happened fits into a wider problem of the normalisation of swastikas on campus and Nazi imagery, and the fact that no one calls it out. We're not calling it out. As an NEC, we needed to stand strong and immediately call out what's happening, because, like, personally, when I see a swastika on campus, it's normal. Like, it's normal. I don't get upset anymore. You know, it's predicted, and like that's a massive problem. Like, and think about how that makes Jewish students feel, that when it's normalised to them, like seeing these things on campuses. Like, in this day and age in the UK, like, it's just awful. Students have come to me, like Jewish students have come to me and said that, like, it happens in halls, on campuses, white t-shirt parties, like that's even a thing. But the silence of everyone just kind of sets this tone of normality, and that it's just normalised. SUs and like us as leaders of the student movement like need a strong response to this. Like, it's unequivocal. Like, Jewish students and all students who were kind of victims of Nazi persecution, but also it feeds into kind of the wider like the fascist rhetoric that's going on, and it targets everyone, right? And Jewish students will be understandably like incredibly worried about this on their campuses, and we just need like unequivocal support, condemnation as soon as possible. We can't just be waiting, and Jewish students can't just be in limbo and waiting when they see this, and it's just terrible. It can't be swept under the carpet. This isn't an issue that's going to be swept under the carpet, and we need to stand loud and unified and clear that this is a problem, and we need to stand with those students who are being affected by it. And it fits into the wider rhetoric that's happening on our campuses, and it's terrifying, and we all need to call it out, because a swastika and a Nazi imagery might have an effect on me and my community, but it also is part of a wider movement of demonisation and fascism on campus, which affects everyone, and we really need to be like loudly calling it out and not just waiting, for a response. So that's my answer.
Okay, we're going to do your final three together. Which ones were you done? Sorry. How do students' unions access mental health first aid training, and how can SUs encourage their institutions to support the running of the training? That's one. What progress has been made on motion 408, Ticket to Ride, with train travel costs being a prominent barrier to education in FE? Will you be doing any work on a national level at ensuring this does not have an impact on students' welfare and education? And finally, NUS Interfaith Week took place recently. What successes were there for students on campus?
Okay, I'll use my time to first answer the first two, because I've mentioned Faith Week, and then if I still have time, I'll talk about that more. But so the first one is mental health first aid. Basically, you can access it in the Learning Academy, which Ali mentioned. And so at StratCon, Ali launched the Learning Academy, and within that, I've been working on ensuring that mental health first aid training is in there with the UD campaign. And we have, that's kind of what student unions were telling us that they wanted the most. So we've got that in there. We're also, it's at the most discounted rate, and we're also looking about getting, and with even more subsidised places for FE. Now we're looking at getting funding, like I said, for small and specialist unions and FE to get that hopefully for free, and looking at a more sustained model in NUS as well, how we might be able to kind of do it internally, like run it as internally as kind of having trainers, and then like NUS people will be trainers, so it'll be a lot more sustainable and long term, because it will just be kind of done in house. And so that's how you can access it, and we're really looking forward. So it's opening in January, I'm pretty sure. But you can register for it now, but the first ones are happening in January. So shout out to SUs. If you want to get involved and you want to do it, do sign up at Studio Learning Academy, which is really exciting. The one on the question about travel costs for FE. So I am like heavily supporting Emily's FE Journey campaign, which was launched, and it's really exciting and it's really, really important. And we've met about to see how we can tie it in to the welfare campaign as well. But shout out to Emily on that. And the survey's already got 1,000 responses, which is unbelievable. So a plea to fill it in more. So that's what we're doing kind of around that. With apprentices, I mean, everyone's mentioned it, which is great, but they're too often forgotten in our movement. And at the apprenticeship weekend, the NSOA one, the National Society of Apprentices, we did a campaign where we sent package, I don't know which order it all goes in, but 150 letters to ministers and MPs about travel and transport for apprentices, and especially based on kind of their minimum wage, which is awful. And so we did that, and we really are like kind of making transport and from that kind of finance and feeding that into the Poverty Commission, especially with the welfare campaign submission, kind of making that pivotal. So yeah, and then I guess if I have more time, I will continue to talk about Interfaith Week. Yeah, I just want to like shout out to all the SUs that did like amazing stuff. Like it's so exciting to see that these like grassroots things are happening on campuses, often campuses that don't have necessarily like structured interfaith societies or faith reps and stuff like that. Yeah, it was just really great to see, and we were like retweeting it and supporting it, and the impact that I could see that it was having on the interfaith network when I actually was like interested in setting up a student one, and they were like, I don't know, but they were like, no, don't do it, because students really are the heart of like the campaign, and like their enthusiasm for like our work was really inspiring, and they were like so like excited in what was happening on campuses, and I was really proud to be like the VP welfare while that was happening, and I was really proud, and we saw interest in like kind of organised formal events, but also events kind of with more casual things like coffee conversations and stuff. I'll stop talking, but I could talk about interfaith forever. And look out if you're interested in interfaith work, what we're going to be doing next term, about producing like date guidance and food provision and stuff like that. So yeah, thanks for having me, NEC.
Cool. Thank you. So next is me, even if you haven't had enough of me already. But I'm going to ask Izzy to chair while I'm there. Oh, that rhymed. Weeks I've been continuing my work to make sure that we have fair unions, political unions and sustainable unions. So what I've been doing to create fairer unions is supporting Living Wage Week. I've been campaigning in Durham and Nottingham and Warwick, fighting with students and student activists to ensure that their student unions and universities pay all their workers a living wage. We've been working with the GMB and student unions to make sure that student staff are unionised, and we've been working with the International Rescue Committee and Ben & Jerry's with the Home for Refugees campaign, ensuring that displaced refugees around Europe can get access to safe housing. We've also been working with Student Action for Refugees on the Equal Access campaign, and I've been working with the Union of Jewish Students on the implementation of the research into the experiences of Jewish students that we did last year. For a political union, I've been working with Citizens UK, and we're developing an activist academy where we're going to bring in training for staff members, for student officers and for students who want to campaign on anything, on any issue on their campus. That will start in January, so please watch out for registration that will be opening soon. We've also been working with Friends of the Earth with 12 colleges on community organising on different campaigns. We met in Cardiff and we spoke about the progress that they've been doing and the principles of community organising. And on the 3rd of November we also had the campaign for Votes at 16. So thank you to everyone who took part in that campaign. Unfortunately the debate wasn't read entirely and we ran out of time. There was lots of filibustering by this government who want to make sure that 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds continue to be disenfranchised and can't vote. But we will be back with a further campaign, and thank you very much to everybody who took their part, and please watch out for a campaign that will be launching soon. For sustainable unions, we had our Student Eats Conference and Student Sustainability Summit with the largest ever delegates, with over 135 people coming to the best city in the UK, to Coventry, to discuss many things around sustainability and student eats, and how we can make local solutions to global problems, and how students can leave education as a part of the solution to our economic and sustainability needs for the future. We also launched our coffee cup campaign, so we're going to look at reusable coffee cups, and we're asking student unions who are already working on this to be a pilot union for us, so please be in touch with me if you have. And we've also had more student unions saying it's the last straw with our campaign to ensure that single-use plastic straws aren't used as regularly or are banned from student unions. We also have our Green Impact at 10 award in Parliament, and we've got many MPs coming along, as well as student activists and organisations, to celebrate the fantastic achievement of a Green Impact, and also to celebrate for the first time we have it in FE unions, and FE is playing their part in the campaign too, which should be hugely celebrated. Also at Festival in Walsall, Wout and Emily on a fantastic conference, we launched the FE guide, and we spoke to many students about how they can play their part in ensuring that we use less fossil fuels in future. And we also launched at the Student Sustainability Conference the SDG teaching, where we're getting university lecturers and college lecturers to embed sustainability into their curriculums. There was more, sorry.
Hi, so before Robbie does his 2 minutes, I just have to say that with the videos, we actually kind of outsource the subtitling, and we're going to be, going forward, we're going to be looking at reviewing them a lot closer than what we're doing, and like, yeah. I now hand over to Robbie for his 2 minutes update.
Cool, thank you. Just really quickly, I was just going to finish on, since the Emissions Are Possible campaign, there's been 4 more student unions who have divested from fossil fuels, universities, which I think is fantastic. The Activist Academy, which I spoke about, is now online and is open for registration. So there is an event in London on the 24th of November, and one in Manchester on the 26th. We're going to be working with Citizens UK around creating an activist academy, so whatever your students want to campaign on, your staff members can train students, do come along. Living Wage Week, I think 2 student unions now are now paying their workers 100% fair wage? That's not right. The living wage, and at Coventry, the Sustainability Summit, we also launched our campaign around reusable coffee cups. So that's about it from me. That'll be quick.
Thank you. Now hand over to the clocks.
You only have one question, Robbie.
Okay.
Which is, if I can get it. Several disabled students have contacted you about the inaccessibility of the Last Straws campaign, particularly in the case of students who require bendy straws due to lack of muscular or motor ability, whereby they require a straw to consume any fluids. How will you be taking into account their feedback to ensure that disabled students can still access their SU bars and cafes on an equal basis to their non-disabled peers without incurring a disability tax? And going forwards, how do you plan to consult with disabled students about potential accessibility issues with your sustainability campaigns?
Yeah, thank you to all the students who did get in touch. I spoke to some on the phone, and I know there's one more person I need to speak to about this. We have reflected on that, and we're asking, in there I said to ban single-use plastic straws, but we've asked student unions now to put straws at the back of the bar so people can ask for them. The whole point of the campaign is to stop using reusable plastics, and we need to reduce it. So if it's at the front of the bar, people can take them, but if they're at the back, it puts it out the way, so if people ask for a straw, they can have one. We are looking at how we provide things with a NUSL, but that's an ongoing conversation. But I have took all the things into consideration. I'm very sorry about that, and I will obviously work with Rachel and peers and anybody else about the campaigns that come from, and not just around straws, but anything and all the events that we do need to be better and more accessible, and I'm always open to feedback and being told how to improve my campaigns and the campaigns of the organisation. So I may get it wrong, and I'm sorry, I truly am, but I have reflected, and the campaign has reflected on its outlook too. Thank you for that question.
Thanks, that's it. We're not doing Amateur's accountability now, as he's currently sitting on the interview panel for the Office for Students. And so he'll deliver his report after lunch when he comes back. I'm going to stay in the chair, lucky you all, while we receive reports from board members. So at the last meeting, Shakira reinstated the previous practice of receiving brief reports from the NEC members on the work on our boards and to keep you updated with their work. So Robbie is a member of, lucky Robbie, the NUS UK board, the NUS Charitable Services board, the Epona board and the HR subcommittee. So as he sits on a few groups, I will give him 5 minutes to report kind of what he's been up to on those groups. We don't have any questions, but you can ask them in the break if you have any questions. So 5 minutes, take it away.
Thank you. I'll try and keep this brief. So the trustee board, or NUS UK board that we now call it, was yesterday, and we spoke about the race equity plan for NUS and its implementation. We spoke about the finances of our organisation, and we spoke about the Poverty Commission. The HR committee, I had a diary clash because when I was appointed, it had a preset date, and I was in Coventry for the Student Sustainability Summit, so I didn't attend that. The charity board, I was there for the quality student union stuff, but I think Ali will be much better at updating us than me. I actually went home sick after about half an hour being in the meeting. I actually turned to one of my colleagues and said, I don't feel well. And she said, yeah, you do look bad. I thought, charming, cheers, Bab. And I didn't get to make it to Epona because I was ill for that week. But there has been an update on Epona, and I don't know if you know NEC, but we have decided to close Epona and stop trading it to student unions. It was running at a huge deficit, and unfortunately, we couldn't continue the work. But what we have done is interrupted the market. We know now that student unions are looking at 100% fair trade clothes and garments, and we know that we passed a resolution at a conference in Solihull, I can't remember what conference it was called, where student unions by 2022 are going to provide 100% fair trade on our NUSL and with our purchasing power. So we did interrupt the market. It's not a sad story, it's a success story. We know that lots of other people are starting to change how they're making university hoodies and clothes and stuff. So it's very sad, but from the 22nd of December, Epona will cease trading. So that's it from me for all the boards. Thanks.
Thanks. Smashed it with timing. So I'm going to hand the chair back over to Robbie. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so next, is Ali in the room? No, okay, so can we just go to Jess first, please, Bab, who is a member of 2 boards with me, the NUS UK board and the NUS Charity Services board. And if you can give a quick update of what we spoke about or anything you want to add. You'd have 3 minutes.
Hello. I didn't make it to the charity board because I was on holiday, sipping daiquiris on a beach, trying to forget that the NUS exists. But I did make it to the other board, the trustee board, NUS UK board. All these boards are proper boring, literally. They all kind of blend into one. So this was just this week, and mostly I raised issues around financial accountability. There have been numerous issues in which we've had to save money as an organisation, but some stuff like the Liberation Conference budget has been cut, and I was raising concerns that student-facing stuff that our members actually care about, that stuff should be prioritised and not cut. What we've had is a 10 grand slash of the Liberation budget, of the Liberation Conference budget, meaning that instead of last year when we had to run 5 conferences with 60 grand, we're having to run 6 conferences with just 50 grand, which doesn't seem workable for us and doesn't seem to be putting our members at the forefront. So I was mainly asking uncomfortable questions about that. That was it, really.
Thank you very much, Jess. And is Ali okay? We'll come back to Ali too then. I'm just going to read this. So finally, Shakira Martin is the chair of the NUS UK board, and Hareem Ghani is a member of the NUS UK board and NUS Charity Services board, and have sent apologies today, so will not give reports. Thank you to all of you who've given reports, and we'll now move to an update on the finances, where I ask Alison to come forward, please. Thank you. And Coventry is the best city. Sorry, NEC. It's not London, it's not Manchester. I'm sorry, Bab. I'm sorry. It's Coventry. So. But I'd vote Manchester second. Do I get a point for that? London third. London third. No? Sorry, Alison.
That's fine. Carry on debating which is the best city in the UK. OK, so I'm Alison Chappell. I'm the Deputy Chief Exec of NUS, and I'm just going to talk you through a finance update. Excuse me. This information was shared with the attendees at Strategic Conversation. It was delivered by a member of the Audit and Risk Committee, John Berg, who is also Chief Executive of Teesside Student Union. I know some of you may have been there, so apologies if you are seeing this again, but we felt it was really important that in advance of the next NEC meeting, when the NEC have to agree the estimates for NUS UK that go to national conference, that you've got an overview of the finances of the organisation going forward. The first slide is a routine piece of information that we give. I'm not going to answer any questions on it because these are not my budgets. These are the campaign budgets for the elected officers, apart from the nation's officers, because the nation's campaign budgets for officers are held within the overall nation's budget. But this is on NUS Connect. Basically, what it shows you is the first column is all the relevant campaigns that each of the various full-time officers are responsible for. The second column is the total budget for the whole financial year that's been allocated to that particular campaign. The third column is the actual spend to October 2017. We've obviously had another month since then, but we don't have that data available because it takes us about a week to, from a management account perspective, to produce the information. We haven't had it for today's meeting. The third column is the amount of money that's left in that budget to spend to the end of the financial year. And probably the easiest thing to start with looking at is the fourth column, which is the percentage that has been spent of the total amount that's available. And if you can just see right at the very bottom line before we get to the couple of bold lines, so the third line up, where it says full-time officer salaries, the percentage there is 34%. So at this point in the year, we would expect that 34% is an average and equal amount of spending for the whole year. So if you ever want to, when you get these pieces of information, if you ever want to work out where you think the campaign is in terms of its year, if you look at what we've paid the full-time officers, because that's an equal amount in 12 equal amounts, i.e. a monthly payment each month, then that's the figure that you should be looking at. So at this point in time, there are some campaigns that are under that 34% spending, and there are some campaigns that are over that 34% of funding. Some of that is timing issues, so Black Students campaign traditionally will have spent more money at this point in the year because Black History Month happens in September, and there's a lot of activity that happens in the Black Students campaign around September. And so that's a usual spending pattern. As you've heard from various officers, there's a lot of work expected to happen in January and February and March next year. So again, we would expect that some of those percentages where they might not be spending 34% at this point, that's okay. Overall, the total amount for the spending on campaigns is hitting that 33%, so that's the very bottom figure on the 4%. So from the perspective of the budget overall, we expect that by the end of the year, these amounts of money will have been spent. So that's just a brief explanation of the spending. If you've got any questions about the actual spend, what it's been spent on, then please feel free to speak to the various officers that are accountable for those budgets. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is just talk you through the presentation. So I'm going to focus on the overview of a piece of work called the New Settlement, which took place a couple of years ago, that's impacted on how we've managed the finances of the organisation. I'm going to look at each of the different parts, or what we call entities in NUS, of their spending and the income that's come in. I'm going to talk briefly to you about the role of the Audit and Risk Committee, which is the committee on behalf of all of the boards of NUS, so the board you've just heard about, which is responsible for securing the financial health and longevity of the organisation. I'm going to briefly talk to you about some of the lessons that they've learnt, and obviously there's a space at the end for you to ask me any questions. I may not be able to answer all of them, depending on what they're related to, but I shall do my best. So if we look at the next slide, in the New Settlement, which was a piece of work done about 3 years ago, which was work that was done independently of NUS to look at how we can streamline the number of different parts of the group when NUS came together with NUS Services, NUS Media, Epona, etc., etc. So previously we used to have 7 entities, and the aim and what we're working towards this year, what was passed at National Conference, was that we should have 3 parts to the whole NUS group. So NUS, although it's a Venn diagram, this is not hierarchical, so there is no overall parent company here. So NUS UK, which is basically the student voice and influence, and student voice and democracy part of the organisation, so where all the campaigning work and all the influence in lobbying work happens. The charity, which is where the membership engagement, union development, sustainability work happens, and then NUS Services, which is obviously where all of our work to try and generate income for both NUS and for student unions happens. And so we are just in the process of finalising moving from what were 7 different organisations to 3. And as I talk through the slides, we're going to present financial information for NUS UK, for the charity and for services, because that's the simplest way of doing that. We have, just for information, and you'll see this in the estimates, we have a company called NUS Holdings, which basically is the company that owns our buildings, employs our staff, and houses all of our infrastructure. And we recharge that out through what's called shared service cost to each of the different entities. So to pay for the heating and lighting in a building, to pay for staff and officers to have laptops and phones and access to the internet, to be paid every month, to have expenses paid, etc., etc. That all comes out of our shared service cost. And so in the estimates and in any budget lines, there is a cost associated for each of the different entities for that. So next slide, and next one. So this is basically the picture for NUS UK. So this is the campaigning and influencing and democratic part of NUS. So what you've got here is the bottom of the graph is the income that we receive that funds all of the activity that we do in campaigning, influencing and democracy. 4.1 million pounds of that comes from affiliation fees from student unions, and 1.2 million pounds comes from Ensley, which is monies that they give to us both from shares that we hold in the company and also a donation that they give us. And for those of you that don't know, NUS set up Ensley in the 1960s and 70s, and so we've got a long-standing relationship which includes a financial relationship with them, i.e. they give us money for us to be able to do stuff. The aim of NUS UK is to break even. So basically we get £5.3 million and in those two various sources, and then the top line explains how we spend that money, and the aim is to break even, because NUS UK is not there to make money, but it's also not there to lose a lot of money. So if I just give you the figures, so our campaigns and policy work, which is predominantly the staffing costs and the costs associated with running events and things like that to do with policy and campaigns, it costs us 1.6 million. The full-time officers and their campaign budgets cost us 1.1 million pounds. Our nations cost £1 million. Conferences cost almost £500,000, £450,000. The running costs are those shared services that I talked to you about, the heat, light, etc., which is nearly £700,000. Our governance costs, which is our boards, it costs about £67,000. And we also have a liability for pension deficits. So NUS it has a closed pension scheme, and many of you may not know about pensions and pension schemes, but there are ongoing liabilities for organisations. This is true for student unions as well, who still have staff who need to benefit from that pension scheme going forward. This year we've had there's been a revaluation of the pension scheme, which has to happen every 3 years, and there's a significant cost that is associated with that, and I'll talk a little bit through that as we go through it. But basically every year NUS UK, along with NUS Services, because there are both staff that were part of those organisations who are still in the organisation or who may have left, who have a pension, and we still have to contribute into the pension scheme to do that. So that costs £525,000. So that's the costs currently and the income currently. If we can have the next slide. The next slide just reiterates for you that there is a decreasing amount of income that is coming in this financial year. As many of you will be aware, there was a recommendation made to National Conference last year from the NEC and the Trustee Board to create a more fair system of affiliation fee for student unions, and so there was a change in the way that we collect or what we ask for in affiliation fees, and for a variety of reasons, including that after National Conference when we'd budgeted, because we do the estimates in February, so each year, but the budget only runs from July to June, so we're, as is normal, we're budgeting what we think income is about 6 months before we actually collect it. And 2 student unions disaffiliated in May last year, and so that has had a knock-on impact to the income that we expect this year. We also expect a number of student unions to make hardship claims, i.e. we can't pay the affiliation to the amount that you're asking, and there are certain rules that we follow there to check whether we ought to give people a break from giving us as much as we are asking for them, and that also has an impact. So we expect this year to be collecting over over £100,000 less in income. So whilst we budgeted for £4 million worth of income, or £4.1 million of income from affiliation fees, we actually expect it to be closer to 3.9 million. So that instantly gives us some issues in terms of the expenditure, because we have to find ways to try and reduce that by anything up to £200,000 this year. We are going through processes internally to reprioritise the work we do so that we can do as much as possible. Obviously there are some differences that we'll talk through in terms of what's possible for us to do. So if we go on to the next slide, this just shows you the difference between the expenditure last year and this year. So with the addition of the extra full-time officer, the trans officer, the FTO costs have gone up this year. The campaigns and policy costs have gone up this year. Nations have gone up this year. And so we have tried to look at ways where we can reduce costs. So we budgeted for conferences to cost us less, for our running costs to cost us less, for our governance to cost us less. But as I said, the pensions deficit has gone up, and there's nothing we can do about that. That's a legal thing that we've got to pay. There are some real pressures within NUS UK in terms of spending and income. And when you come to discuss the estimates in the next meeting, we will have worked through with staff and officers how we can get to a point where next year we are looking to create a break-even budget, and there will be some conversations and discussions that you'll need to have about where the choices are for spending going forward. Excuse me. So if we go on to the next slide, this is just to give, so that's the end of the NUS UK bit. I'm now just going to start to talk to you about the other entities, but before we do that, I just wanted you to be clear where the money comes for the various funding. And this again was agreed with student unions as part of the new settlement report a couple of years ago. So affiliation fees go into NUS UK. The work of the charity and the work of NUS services is funded by the commercial operations and any surplus that we make from our commercial services. So all of the work of the charity, all of the work of union development and membership engagement is funded through any surplus that is made from NUS services. The things that NUS services do, the bulk of the income generation for both student unions and for NUS is the purchasing consortium, so retail and licensed trade and anything else that's in there that I've forgotten. Catering, thank you, Ali, and also NUS Extra card. And NUS Extra, as Ali said in his accountability, there are plans to ensure that we can keep generating income for the student movement and for NUS going forward. But I think it's really important for you to understand that affiliation fees pay for the NUS UK part of the work that NUS does as a whole, and then any surplus that is made from our commercial activities pays for the charity work, and also contributes massively to student unions and the work that they do. So if we move on to the next slide, this you can see is, we call it enterprise internally, but it's basically NUS services. So the income that we generated last year is on the bottom again, and NUS Extra income was just around 6.5 million, and trading support, which is the catering, licensed trade and retail, brought in 1.5 million. The apprentice extra, so the extra card for apprentices, brought in 90,000, and we had 224,000 of sponsorship and advertising. There was then the green line explains how the spending is made up, the costs. So we have Union Cloud, Epona, Insight, which is our research function, Outdoor and Local, which is all of the boards that you see in student unions that have advertising on, back of toilets, all of that sort of stuff, and Yo-Yo. There were running costs, which is basically staffing and all of that sort of stuff, of 3.9 million, and commission that we paid out to student unions of 2.9 million. So there was a surplus last year of 1.4 million. But we had to make adjustments for Epona stock. We had to write off Epona stock before we made the decision to close it, as Robbie said, because it was making a deficit. And also NUS Media was making a loss, so some of that was impacted. Excuse me. Part of that surplus is then given to NUS Charity to enable it to carry out its work. So overall, although the surplus in enterprise in it as an entity was 1.4 million, it ends up being less by the time those donations have been made. If we go on to the next slide, we are expecting the budget for enterprise next year not to change very much. So in terms of the income that's received, it's virtually the same. This obviously then has an impact when you think about the fact that there will be no money to make up the shortfall that might occur within NUS UK because of affiliation fees. So that's obviously quite a significant issue. And although NUS Extra does really, really well, and we've got over 900,000 NUS Extra card holders and users, the growth in NUS Extra is slowing down and sometimes reducing. And so that's a significant pressure both for NUS as a whole, but also for student unions, which again is why Ali's talked previously about the work to have the next generation of NUS Extra. If you go into the next slide, these are the costs associated with enterprise. We are trying to reduce costs in enterprise as much as possible, and this graph demonstrates it's going the other way to NUS UK. And that's partly because all of those income projections are projections, and some of them won't materialise because of things like NUS Extra reductions, etc., etc. If we now move on to the next slide, this is the charities' income and the charities' costs. So we have income from various external sources to support the charity, mainly in sustainability, but we also have the donation from the services, the enterprise, so the donation of nearly £2 million from last year. So the charities income last year was in the region of 4.4 million, but its costs, as you can see, were more than that at 4.6 million. And again, that becomes a pressure on NUS Services to potentially increase its donation if we can't reduce cost. If we move on to the next slide, this shows how the donation from NUS Services has increased from last year, what we expect it to increase from last year to this year, and other costs there are union development, conferences, people and talent, sustainability. Sorry, income. Sorry, that's income. So you can see, apart from the donation, the vast majority of money there comes from sustainability projects. If we move on to the next slide, this shows where things are spent. And so again, that's membership engagement, which hardly increased. Union development, which has increased a little bit. Conferences, which has increased a bit. People and talent has increased significantly, but this is where our race equity work and race matters work sits. So given the prioritisation of that work by NUS, that's where that comes. Sustainability has reduced slightly and running costs have gone up, and that will relate to the number of staff that are employed in that area. That's really just a very quick walk through the income and expenditure of the three different bits of the group. But as you can see, there are financial pressures across the organisation to ensure that we are maximising our income and making our costs as effective as possible and as much as possible reducing costs so that we are balancing the budgets and making more surplus if that's what we need to do. If we just move on to the next slide, I just wanted to very briefly talk to you about financial governance so that you're aware of the way in which the finances are governed in NUS. If you go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. In the articles and of NUS UK and also of the other various entities, the responsibility for the financial health of the organisation rests with the trustees, and the trustees have set up an audit and risk committee which has members from each of the different entities to scrutinise and look in much more detail at the finances of the organisation, and they meet on a regular basis to look at all the things that you would expect a finance committee to do. So to look at projected income, projected spending, actual spend, actual income, and they also set the parameters for each of the different entities. So that's the organisation, that's the committee which says that NUS Services should make a surplus, that the charity should receive a donation, and that NUS UK should break even. And your representatives from here that sit on those committees, those are the things that they'll be discussing in those meetings. It's like a watchdog. It doesn't do the day-to-day management, but it does make recommendations to the boards and through the boards to the NEC. It's made up of 3 chief execs from student unions. As I said, this presentation was given by John Berg, who is one of the chief execs that sit on A&R at Strategic Conversation. We have an external trustee that sits on it, and there are 3 student officers. I can't remember who those officers are, but I know Ali's one, and he will give you an update. And Amate is one, and somebody else. I'm sure they'll, yeah. They also, as the name suggests, they'll also look at the risks for the organisation. And one of the key things that is a risk at the moment is the financial health of the organisation. So it's something that they have been thinking about and talking about. They then report to each of the different boards, and as I said, there are people that sit on the committee from different boards. If we move to the final slide, this is just the end of year figures for 2016-17, which is the financial year that ended in the 30th of June. That just shows you NUS UK so where the brackets are, that means there's a deficit, and where there's no brackets, it means there was a surplus. That's the various bits and bobs of operating surplus for last year. I think, again, the key thing to note, that operating surplus doesn't mean there's a spending spree. We are aware that particularly the pensions deficit is going to impact on the need for NUS to continue to grow its cash, its reserves, because we will have to spend that money over the next 16 or 17 years, I think, before the deficit at its current level is potentially got rid of. So although there is an operating surplus across the group, it wasn't as much as was budgeted, and therefore, again, impacts on the longevity of the financial health of the organisation. And then the extraordinary items which were spent, I've referred to some of those if we go to the next slide. So these are the things which impacted significantly on the accounts last year. So there was a suspension revaluation, which if any of you are interested in NUS's consolidated accounts, you will see that there actually is a deficit of £3.5 million last year. And that was because of a £3 million revaluation deficit for the pensions deficit. Many student unions are in a similar position where their balance sheets are reflecting quite significant losses because of the revaluation. If any of you want to know about pensions and pension revaluations, I can do my best to answer questions in the break, but I think probably it's not worth talking about in the whole NEC. We also, as I talked about, wrote off Epona stock and some media stock and made some minor adjustments. The audit accounts deficit was 7.5 million for the consolidated group. But that is made up of quite significant chunks of one-off write-offs, some of which are not cash and some of which are cash, which leaves the cash balance at the bottom there. Okay, I think that's probably all. There's another one that's about SUS stuff. You need to move to the next slide. Yeah, that's just the audited balance sheets. Again, if anyone's interested. So I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has got any. Oh, blimey.
Okay,
wow.
great.
Finance, 3 questions. Wow.
Quick. Just to quickly spice up the NEC, one from Joe Cox, that Hillary Clinton listens to two becomes one before bed. I don't know if that's true, but I really hope it is. So we'll start with Flo, and then Aaliyah, and then Eden. Thank you. Siwa, can you be on the mic, please? Thanks, Bab.
Alison, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So in the first slide where you talked about the FTO spend versus budget as of October 2017,
yeah.
I noticed for Black Students Campaign, where in the actual spend it was, for October 17, it was 6.9%, if I'm correct.
I think it's probably 6.9 million. So £6,900, which
okay.
I remember is 44% or 50%. Yeah.
Apologies.
Yeah.
So, and then if we go to the 6th column where it's forecasted variance of 5.1 million.
Thousand. Sorry, could we get that slide back up, please?
Yeah,
it's
sorry.
the very first one.
So my eyes are a bit bad. I just took a screen grab of it. I just noticed why it kind of took a dip by 1 point. Why there's a slight dip in terms of the forecast, and also my concerns is for liberation campaigns, why there's been like a 10k cut, because at the end of the day, for someone like myself who identifies as both Black and as a woman, like it's going to be very hard for liberation campaigns to deliver such a conference with probably a small amount of budget, like to make sure it's the best for people. And for these cuts, it's very concerning as to why that is.
Okay, so if I answer the question about what it says on there. So the forecasted end of year position, which is the 5th column, if spending continues at the rate that it has been so far, the end of year position for Black Students campaign would be that they would spend £20,600. And so the very final column is how much that would have gone over their budget. So they would have been £5,100 over their budget. Now, given this is a third of the way through the year, it may be that Black Students campaign doesn't spend that amount of money. It might just spend the £15,500 that it's been allocated. So the way that the campaign budget is allocated. So the campaign budget, just to be clear, doesn't include conferences. It's basically the expenses for the full-time officer, any campaign activity that they want to undertake where there is a physical cost for something, so if that's a poster or a leaflet, and also the costs of the committee and having committee meetings. So that's basically what the budgets are for. NUS conference last year agreed an increase to the overall campaign budget for all the full-time officers of around £10,000, if my memory serves me right. However, it also created a 5th Liberation Conference. And so custom and practice with the full-time officers has been to allocate funding equally between all of the campaigns. And because NUS Conference didn't agree a higher than £10,000 increase, the option potentially for the FTOs was that the trans campaign got that £10,000 increase and everybody else got the budget that they had last year, or they spread it equally. But given last year the funding was, I think, £17,000, of which then each campaign gave £2,000 towards the national demo, so they ended up with £15,000. The FTOs felt, didn't disagree that we should go with custom and practice, i.e. equally distribute the funds so that everybody had the same. So there isn't a specific loss for any of the campaigns, because all of the campaigns have taken an equal reduction. And the reason for that is that there was an extra Liberation campaign agreed by National Conference, but only a £10,000 increase in that whole campaign budget for the whole of the FTOs. So in effect, everybody took a little bit less. And each campaign took a little bit less. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
I said you can't. Yeah.
Okay. I need to not answer any more questions.
Sorry, just some of the questions can be a bit political, and obviously the staff have a protocol, so if the trade union get in touch with me to say that question's political, it has to stop there because it's a member of staff. Is that all right? So there's nothing bad, it was just there's some questions that we can't answer, some that we can, because some are political and some are not. And like, if the staff trade union texts me to say no, then it has to be. No, it wasn't you personally, it was just to let NEC know as well in general, okay? I will come to Zamzam and Ilyas, but Aaliyah, you're first.
Thank you. First, Clarkey things. On the agenda, it says that this is an approves item. It's not. We're not approving anything here, am I right? Yeah. That will be for next time. This is just we're noting the budgets.
It's mainly that you're noting. Yeah. The finance update is a finance update.
So I have two questions, requests, I guess. Firstly, before next NEC, will we be able to have a very clear breakdown of the budget in terms of where money has been cut, so being able to see previous budgets versus this current budget that's going to come through that we're being asked to approve, including exactly how much has been, like in real terms, how much has sort of been cut to the different areas, so campaigns, conferences, and so on, but then also a further breakdown of which conferences, which campaigns, and so on, including how the money's divided up between the FTOs and their campaigns, and so on. Is that possible? Will we be receiving that?
So the NUS estimates will always have a current year budget and then an estimate for the future years. So yes, that information would be there. It won't necessarily be in the level of detail that you're asking for. So I probably need to have a conversation with you to work out what specifically you're meaning. The reason some of that information won't be available to be shared completely is because it does impact in terms of some of the activity costs and staffing costs. But there is always, in the estimates, there is always a, what did we plan to spend this year, and then what are we planning to spend next year?
I'm really sorry. I'll put you back, but if we've got time, because everyone wants to ask a question, is that all right? Sorry. So, Eden.
Sorry, Eden, just want to...
I have a technical question. Would it be possible for us to go to the slide about FTO costs?
That one?
No, there was a little one later that said that FTO costs had
Oh,
gone
the
up
1
from
point...
just,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So, okay, that's about the 4th slide in, I think. 5th slide in. So it's, I think it's slide 7. Or possibly slide 5. Slide 5, that one?
I think the one after that.
So slide 7.
Oh, maybe not. Basically, there was a slide that said
That's
that...
6. The next one after that. That one?
Perfect. And so for the budget for 2017-2018, the FTO cost is being cited at 1.2, just over 1.2 million pounds. But in the budget packs that we were sent for last NEC, the full-time officer budget is labelled at £972,000. What does the difference mean?
Okay, so the difference is that in the nations, the way that we, in the estimates, and therefore in the budget, we represent the nations is nations' affiliations are taken out of the overall global figure for affiliation fees and offset against the nation's costs. So the way that I've represented the information here is the totality of costs. So if you look at the paper on affiliation, if you look at the paper, the budget paper, which has affiliation fees, the income coming into NUS won't be 5.3 million. I think from memory it's something like 4-point-something million, and that's because the income that comes in from the nation's student associations and student unions affiliations goes into to offset the nation's income and expenditure. So the reason that that FTO cost is less in the budget is it doesn't include the nation's full-time officers, and there are 7 full-time officers in the nations. So because we're representing this in sort of chunks of things, then that's why it's included. So the nation's costs in there will be the staffing costs and associated running costs, rather than including the FTOs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Can we go to Zamzam next, please?
Okay, if it's getting colder, we'll talk to LSE over the lunch break and see if there's something we can do about the aircon.
Thanks for that. I just wanted to ask 2 questions, sorry. One was about how often do the officers get sent the management accounts, specifically for their budgets, and do they get a breakdown of their budgets, and do they get support and sort of training around how to manage a budget? The other one was around, you spoke about the income from that NUS got, and there was a significant amount that was reflected in 16-17, but not in 17-18. And it was, I think it was marked as other income. I wanted to know what that was and why it wasn't reflected in the year to come. And then there was a massive write-off on NUS holdings. There was a huge deficit, and it didn't necessarily make sense. I just wanted to know what was the context behind that as well.
Okay, so if I In terms of the management accounts, so for the campaign budgets, the staff that support the officers and therefore the officers through conversations with them have conversations on a monthly basis about their campaign spend budgets. They're produced about a week or 10 days after the month end, so that information is done on a monthly basis. And then if officers want to look at the specific things that have contributed towards their spending, then they can have access to that. But they tend to get information like that spreadsheet rather than the detailed management accounts, because we understand that not all officers are able and want to. In the induction for officers, they're also given financial information and financial training in the context of how much budget is, how much things cost. It varies with some officers having more of that because they want it or because they're interested, but there's a generic sort of financial piece of information. In terms of the specifics, I don't know the answer to the question because I'm not sure what you're referring to, but I'm happy to pick that up at lunchtime if that helps, and if we need to feedback we can. But if you've got a specific slide, I can maybe talk, but I'm the income for NUS UK. Okay, so sorry, that is predominantly income that we receive in Wales for the Wise Wales project, which is a student engagement partnership supporting student unions in Wales. So it's grant funding that we get from a variety of funders in Wales. When we budgeted last year, we were in the process of at the end of an agreement. So the end of the current funding agreement was October. So when we budgeted, we weren't sure we were going to get that, so we don't budget it, but we've actually successfully secured funding for the project, so it is continuing. So that will be reflected in the estimates for next year, because we know that that's funding that's over a couple of years period. So whenever we have external funding and we're not sure whether it's going to continue, we don't budget for it. Yeah. Deficit on...
Can I just remind NEC of the staff protocol online? So if you're talking about staff, stop. Sorry, Samson. No, sorry. There's been comments made online.
Is that the very end slides? Yeah. I suspect, but I don't know for sure, that that's the pension deficit, because NUS Holdings is the bit that employs all the staff. So, yeah.
Ilias, you were next.
Ilias
no?
is passed.
Okay, so can we go to Shwana?
Okay.
Jess, you're Joe, then new Jess. Sorry.
Hi, so on the previous slide, I think it might have been 7, there shows an increase in money going to the nations, and I wondered if you had an idea of how much of that goes to Scotland, and also if it had been allocated to anything in particular.
The simple answer is no, but I can go and find the information and talk to you about it. I don't know the specific detailed breakdown, but I can find it out.
Can we go to Joe next, please?
Hiya. You mentioned that the leftover stock from Epona is being written off.
Yes.
Are there any plans for that? And is there any chance it could be given to students' unions who are facing financial deficits because of both the bad practice of Epona for the last 6 months and the fact that we've had a really short notice period for the fact that it's ending? Thank you.
Okay, so my understanding is that the student movement has been told via GISCs and things like that Epona stock is being sold off cheaply. And we are trying to get rid of as much of the stock as possible. And I'm sure that if you speak to me in the break, if you haven't had notification of that, there was a discussion at the NUS UK board yesterday about what to do with the remaining stock. No decisions have been made on that, so I'm sure that the people, the trustees there can take those comments on board.
Thank you, Alison. That's the end of the questions. I think that we are going to move to lunch. So thank you very much, Alison. I can't say that. I was going to say you were fabulous, but I can't say that. Let's have lunch.
Thank you.
retrograde. So it's going to be bad.